thank you very much. Thank you to all the organizers for their kind invitation, and thank you for those of you in Paris and online. It's a great pleasure to be with you, and it's great to see that you're trying so hard to bring us together in spite of the fact that we are currently in different countries. So my presentation will be on the key rays, leaf vegetables, key rays that have been used recently in cooking, and my presentation will be focusing on how these leaf vegetables have gained in visibility recently, and why they sort of dropped out of or went under the radar for a long time. So in spite of the strong economic growth in India, although currently it's been hampered by COVID-19, in spite of the strong economic growth, there's still a lot of inequalities with a lot of contradictions. For example, a lot of women who are either undernourished or or overweight, and one child out of 5 has a body weight that is lower than average when they're under 3. So there is no link between economic growth and equality. India is at the second stage of its food transition. I'd just like to give you a bit of background. Between the 60s and 90s, the Green Revolution took over, and we gave up the mills and the kirai as the bulk of household diets, and it was replaced by rice and wheat. And it's a similar trend in Senegal, where I work with Daniel Carrel, who I know is listening into this symposium. In the 90s, there was a huge shift with a drop of consumption of mills and kirai in the consumption of households. And so fewer crops were being grown. And since the 2000s and the 2010s, middle classes in rural and urban areas are looking for fresh ingredients for their health and to protect the environment. The COVID-19 crisis has really challenged this linear model, and has thrown up a lot of questions. And the assumption that we can make is that these leaf vegetables are critical players to tell a new narrative of what is good and what is bad. COVID has been an opportunity for us to refocus on the basics, and here leaf vegetables, to see what can we focus on in times of crisis. Maybe that's a bit quick. Yeah, take your time, because you've got 20 minutes. Okay, so these tropical leaf vegetables have a lot of social, cultural, and environmental impacts. They are very diverse. Some of them are wild. Some of them can be grown very easily. They are very much appreciated for their nutritional values because of the microelements and the different minerals and vitamins that they harbor. But there are vegetables that have been overlooked and that are the bulk of the diet of people from lower castes and people who work in the fields. They are also looked down upon by young men and women because they sometimes taste a bit bitter. You have to spend a lot of time cleaning them. and you have to cook them for quite a long time. And instead of that, young girls and boys eat pizza, pasta, and generally speaking, junk food. And it's a way for young people to mark the fact that they don't belong to a lower caste. The Sierra has worked a lot on these issues in the African context, of these vegetables that are very easy to grow, that don't need a lot of water and don't take up a lot of space. In Tamil and in India, they have a real social and cultural meaning. They are easy to buy. They're very cheap. They're very ordinary. So it's not a daily food, and it shouldn't be, because you shouldn't eat it every day, because if you eat it too often or too much of these vegetables, it's not good for your health. So Indian society is full of contradictions when it comes to the messages sent out to women. We tell them that they need to work and to feed their family, but they only have little time to work and prepare food. So how can we find a solution to this? And how can we address gender inequalities? And how can we rethink agency in that context? Sorry. There is a fine line between reclaim and being forced to stay in the kitchen by men and society at large. So our methodology was very much about exploring more than anything else. We had to carry out our interviews over the phone because of the COVID-19 crisis. And what I'm presenting to you here today is the work that has come out of 15 interviews, and the work that I've done with Idumbala, who is a co-author on this work. And she has shared her insights from her discussions with her family and friends, and she's currently completing a PhD. So I'm going to start off by telling you about the theoretical tenets of our study. Then I'll be talking about these kirai, leaf vegetable, and what they mean. And then I'll wrap up with my own analysis. So first of all, here you have a theoretical reference to a symposium that we organized in Brazil that brought together a lot of feminist researchers who work on a feminist approach to agriculture. It took place in Recife. There were about 500 participants, mostly women. And we drew up an advocacy text to criticize some aspects of the approaches that are chosen here and there. So by taking this example of leaf vegetables, which is a small example, you can extract a lot of critics that we've tied together in this document. In other words, some vegetables or leaf vegetables are being denigrated. And by doing so, we denigrate the people who grow these vegetables and who feed on them. So that's the first important item, the first important point, rather. Second critic, the formal economy does not take into account the principles and economic behaviors and doesn't really give them the right level of importance. We focus mainly on what is productive, on what is profitable, whereas what women do, their know-how is not always profitable, but are nonetheless extremely important. And then you have the caste system also, which needs to be taken into account. Thirdly, here you have a critic of the political vision that does not take into account these low spaces in fighting against inequalities. The care-based approach, as it was mentioned earlier, really throws back to a very private sphere. So it's really about opening up this field and recognizing the right to resources, so soil, seeds, water, etc., and safeguarding the commune, very important in India. So it's about reclaiming, starting off from the interview that we carried out. And then the division of labor is also criticized quite strongly, because women have to stay at home and they do all the care work, and that means that inequalities become persistent. And their know-how in terms of preparing food is not considered as being important, when in fact it is vital. So now I'm going to go into greater detail and talk about Pondicherry and about the Kirei leaf vegetables that are considered as being insignificant, whereas they are in fact extremely precious. Higher and lower middle classes are seeking better diets with healthier food. A platform has been set up by the French Institute in Pondicherry to think about these matters of how we can improve our diets and make them healthier. And also we've had a discussion about the importance of gardens and what we grow in them, and how we eat or share what comes from our vegetable patches. So in the market, you can see that there are a lot of kireis, so these leaf vegetables. I was there this morning and I saw 25 different kinds of kirei on the market stalls. Smaller farmers, men and women alike, who grow their vegetables outside of Pondicherry, come every morning with huge bags of these leaf vegetables that are then sold on to the women that you see here, and then who in turn sell them to the general public. And what's impressive is that consumers, buyers, know exactly how to tell the difference between the different kinds of kirei, different leaf vegetables, and they know which ones are good for you or what they contain, what kind of vitamin, etc. And the lady I was with this morning at the market discovered another 2 different kind of kireis, and that just speaks to the great diversity of this leaf vegetable. Kireis can be sold on the street by elderly women who could not survive by doing another job. The only thing that they can do is to pick these vegetables and sell them. They have to do that. They have no other choice. It's the only way they can feed themselves, and their sons and daughters force these elderly women to sell kireis on the streets. So they collect or gather kireis in the fields. They make bunches out of them and they sell them on the streets. So they're sat outdoors in the dust, under the sun, right in front of the motorbikes that drive past them. And what I found quite moving is that these elderly women from very low castes told me that they very much enjoy the opportunity that they have to sell kirei, so these leaf vegetables, and give some tips on how to prepare them to consumers. A lot of people have forgotten how to prepare these leaf vegetables, so these elderly women are able to pass on their knowledge, and they are very proud to do so. They feel that from their very low position, they are still able to give out tips on how to prepare these leaf vegetables. So the kirae can also be found in gardens. Often it's older women who are familiar with these leaf vegetables. In Tamil, they are called the grandmother's vegetables, and as I mentioned earlier, young people are not so much interested in these vegetables. Pondicherry is quite a small town when you look at India in general, and currently it's the third generation of people who were born in Pondicherry. So the third generation really have no ties with the rural world. Now, when women have children, they start finding an interest in plants and how it can help them breastfeed and how it can improve the health of their own children. And this picture here is interesting because you've got a maid who is with the lady of the house, and you often have this kind of situation where maids can draw on their knowledge and tell the lady of the house what they know about a given plant. And sometimes they bring leaf vegetables from the villages where they come from. What's interesting in this picture here is that kirae can be a wild plant, but it can also be grown in gardens or in fields. Sometimes the seeds are transported by birds, and they grow in gardens a bit randomly or in the streets. But you also have rooftop gardens, which are increasingly popular in India, especially in Pondicherry. There are areas where people tend to unwind, a space for women to grow what they want very cheaply to prepare food for their families. There's a lot of leaf vegetables in rooftop gardens, quite typically. And these leaf vegetables are grown either because women have bought some seeds or because they have taken some from a nearby field or from the streets and decided to water them and grow them on their rooftop gardens. I can see that my time is nearly up, so I'm going to move on quickly. Here you have a platform that shows that there's a lot of initiative that aims at giving greater visibility to food. Here you can see that young people are increasingly taking an interest in the food that they eat and on protecting the environment. I was talking about how we can showcase the know-how of elder women. You can see here that there's a transmission of knowledge between older women and middle-class men who are interested in eating healthy food. And then there's everything that you can draw from these leaf vegetables, extract, which are good for people's health. And there's also a lot that has been done on social media to fight COVID-19 by eating kirae. And you also have some recipes that are put out there online to allow women to prepare these kirae properly and prepare it in a way that is enticing even for their younger children. In the current Tamil context, there's a strong link between food, health, body, mind, and environment. All of this is to be seen and considered as one. Food and the body are one and the same, in other words. So there is there is a lot of importance given to kirae because it's it's good for people's health. And here I have two slides that I think are quite interesting, because I think it's interesting to understand the relationship that people have to these leaf vegetables, and to look at this triangle here. First of all, the necessity, because I mean it's women who cook at home, the necessity to adapt easily. In other words, women have to know how to cook the kirei depending on the weather, depending if there's a full moon or not, if it's raining or if it's not raining. Everything needs to be taken into account.
So they have either good or bad elements depending on whether or not they go with the body of the eater. And then there's another thing about the freshness of the ingredients. So these kirai have to be, in order to affect the body positively, they have to be varied. You have to have a combination of these kirai. So these kirais have to be diversified and associated also to the environment in which they were gathered and grown. So the third point is the link with the ecology and the locality. So the general idea is that if you're in good health if you eat the foods that are grown where you're living, because there is a very close association between the food and the milieu. So now, what exactly does this mean in terms of concerns for women, this triangulation? It means that adaptability presupposes that they have to be careful about all people, that they take the right decisions, that they negotiate with their families, that they prepare different dishes depending on the taste. So sweet, salty, bitter, acid, astringent, and in accordance with the classification of the hot and the cold, because your stomach has to feel all of these things. Now, then the diversity means they have to be bought at a daily level, and men have to buy and the women have to prepare it, and you can't waste. You have to dose exactly the right quantity, sorry, and then you have to preserve the cultivated biodiversity. And for ecology, it is you have to eat what is close to you, relocate your food habits, and this is cultural. It's a cultural way of thinking, linking up your ecology to what you eat. Now, I think that what is important here is to recognize the complexity or the specificity of women's know-how, cooking know-how. They're never chosen by chance. They have to know exactly what they need, neither too much nor too little. So you can't eat it more than 2 or 3 times a week, never in the evening. You have to have a total control over the different stages of cooking. You have to always combine them with other things. And some of them are bitter. And if they're badly cooked, they can become poisonous. You also have to preserve the tastes and the nutritional qualities. You also have to know how to cook with pleasure, because otherwise your food is affected by it, and therefore the person who eats it can be affected by it as well. Then you have rituals of passage. uh, so today there aren't so many more extended families, there are more nuclear families, so there aren't so many of these rituals of passage so much. But you have to be able to be appreciated by your in-laws, by your husband, and it sometimes take a lot of work, sometimes 4 hours of work in the kitchen. You have to know how to organize the way you do it. But also there are women who say that cleaning this kira is a moment when they can share the time with their children, well, obviously their daughters and sometimes their husbands. So these are the different sequences of preparation. I'm sorry, I don't have time to go into them. So to conclude, I would say that there's already a value, a revalorization of this by the public authorities because of their food qualities and food values and cooking values. And it's really important that this should be able to show the value of those who produce the kirai, who sell it, and who distribute them and cook them. And shouldn't be marginalized. So this urban agriculture in the gardens and in the fields has to be part of the attention of public authorities, and the value has to be increased of this, because a big bunch of kirai is 10 rupees. That costs nothing at all. So there are many uh, initiatives that are being undertaken to link up these small producers with the consumers. So between societal ideals and daily reality, it's that the thing is that women have more and more work to do. There's all these households are in debt, and these expenses, there's so much expense in the different family budgets, and so there's a difficult balance to find by between all of this work. And because what's really important, I think, through food is that women should once again play on the collective practices of the community, and that their practices and their know-hows and their skills should not alienate women. Don't always alienate women, sorry. It can give them certain faculties, certain qualities and recognition, and maybe rebuild for themselves a certain political subject. Now, in a society that is still very hierarchical, how can the Kirai build the support of these new subjects and political spaces? There's a question of rights of those who give, those who receive.